Hi, welcome to part two of our special launch day edition of Something Completely Different with Lynn Wilson. We are so excited today to be announcing the launch of our brand new Invite Press book called Both And. This is by my longtime friend and former ministry partner, Jason Moore, who's a pioneer in worship and in technology. We had him on earlier today for a few minutes talking about the book, and now we're coming back to talk more about the book and to reveal and premiere a couple of really cool things that go along with the book, which I'm sure you're going to want to see. First off is this video trailer, which will give you a short overview of the book. This is something that Jason has produced himself. Jason is a man with many talents and hats. And so let's check out the brand new video trailer for Both And. Here it is.
Hello, my name is Jason Moore, and I'm excited to tell you about my new book, Both And: Maximizing Hybrid Worship for In-Person and Online Engagement. When the global pandemic hit in March of 2020, everything about the way we engage in ministry changed. With our buildings no longer available to us, we had to navigate how to translate worship for a congregation not gathered in a physical space. And while some of us were online prior to the pandemic, many jumped online for the very first time. Much like a book has to be reimagined to become a film, worship too needed some reimagining. The truth is, many churches adapted well and even embraced the moment. It was like witnessing Gutenberg fire up his press for the very first time. But as the transition back to in-person began, many churches lost something along the way. After many months of preaching directly to the people online, we reopened our buildings and people started coming back. Some treated their congregations like a studio audience, while many turned their online congregation into watchers of worship rather than worshipers online. Now, you may think it's impossible to worship online and in person at the same time, but I'm here to tell you it's not. In the book, I make the case that no one should feel like an afterthought in our hybrid worship. Not people in the room, nor people at home. Like Paul's hybrid ministry expressed through in-person preaching and letters written from a distance, today's church can lean into and reclaim the power of a hybrid approach to ministry. This book will help you navigate this new ministry landscape we find ourselves in, regardless of your church size, tech savvy, and financial means. It's the result of 2 years of hands-on, proven, real-world strategies and my work as a coach, consultant, and trainer. Pick up your copy today and lean into this fresh both and movement of the Spirit.
Nice. Well done, Jason. That is a great summary of all that we've been going through and what you are trying to deal with and help churches deal with right now in this period of transition. What's your feeling as you're kind of watching that clip show now live for the first time to the world?
I'm feeling like I wish I could have a hair day that good every day, and I'm glad it was captured on camera. And you know, like everyone, I hate the sound of my own voice, you know, but honestly, it has been just an incredible couple of years of learning, being in lots of conversations and learning through others and being able to guide a little bit, you know, but I feel like I've been learning as much as I've been teaching, as I have been coaching kind of throughout this last couple of years, through the pandemic. So
I remember when this
glad
thing
book
first
day is here.
It is. It's finally, right? Yeah, finally here. Yeah, I remember when shelter in place first started, and you know, my wife Shar and our kids, and so we were home for that very first Sunday, which I think was March 20th or somewhere around there, March of 20. And we had at St. Andrew, which is the kind of the mother church for Invite Resources. You can see a steeple behind me there. We already had streaming worship, and so in our situation, it wasn't. There were changes in thinking about how to do it, but the technology was in place, and so we were able basically to turn it on and go. But what was interesting was I was sitting at home with my family on Sunday morning, and they were like, "Let's stand for worship," and so we all stood in our living room, and it was so awkward. We were like, "Okay, this is gonna like." I kind of knew instantly, like that first moment, like, "Oh, this is gonna really change." Like we gotta like think through differently how to do things now that we're in a different space.
Yeah, and I think one of the big learnings some churches never learned this lesson, but I think one of the big learnings that folks that were online before had to recognize was that the old way of doing it, which was completely acceptable before the pandemic, as far as I was concerned, was that we would more or less talk to the room. Welcome to worship. We're so glad you're here. And then at some point we'd look at the camera and say, oh, and if you're worshiping online, thanks for coming today. And then we go back to talking to the room for the rest of the time. And I don't think that anybody thought anything of that back in the pre-COVID times. And then it was like, once we turned all of our attention to the camera because everyone was at home and on the other side of it, we woke people up to what it was like to actually be talked to and to get to participate. I use a silly metaphor sometimes to talk about that. My dog will sometimes curl up next to me when I'm on the couch, and if I scratch him behind the ears, I've made a fatal error, because once I've scratched him behind the ears once, he wants me to continue to do it. And if I stop, he'll start nudging up against me like, come on, come on. And before that, I didn't touch him and he was just fine, you know? And I think, not that our congregation is a bunch of dogs, but I do think that we woke them up. And now the challenge now is that as we've gone back to in the room and there's so many people in the room, if we go back to this after waking people up, then I think that we will lose all the momentum that we've gained over this last couple of years through our hybrid worship.
Isn't it funny? The old way of producing, you would have someone, they'd be talking off camera and like this, and it was perfectly normal. And
Yeah.
I was watching a show the other day. We're so used now to the fourth wall, looking directly at the camera. I was watching an ABC program and the news program, and I forget the guy's name. He always does like the I call them murder line shows, like the murder of the week, and he tries to investigate it. And so he was talking off camera, and I just thought, oh, that looks so weird. Like it's, I was just, even production values are just completely changed now. It's wild.
Yeah. Zoom changed the game a bit. We all stare straight at the camera.
Now, not everybody is happy about this, right? So there are some people who have been pushing back. Maybe some people who really didn't ever like it before, but now that live in-person worship is for the most part returned in most settings. Now we're starting to see some pushback, and there was a recent New York Times article that came out just a couple of weeks ago, why churches should drop their online services. Of course, I saw this, immediately thought of you and thought of the book, and as you have since told me, several other people did too. You didn't get a chance to reply in the moment, but you've since thought about this article, and now we can maybe talk about it a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I've certainly given it some thought, and I mean, the book is a pretty good response to it, quite honestly. But there are a few things that I can kind of share in response. Like I said, my phone blew up that day. I had so many texts and calls and private messages, and I was trying to get the book done, the launch stuff done, so I couldn't get to it.
Yeah.
So I would say more than anything, the author of this article, my guess is that she has never really experienced truly hybrid or both and worship. There's some assumptions made, and what I mean when I say truly hybrid is that sometimes what we do.
Uh-oh. Hopefully we still got you, Jason.
Yep. We both windows went down for a second there on my end. You got me?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay.
You're good.
All right, good. And so I think that there's some assumptions made, because if you've never experienced truly hybrid worship where everyone's a participant, then you might assume that it's there's not a lot of value in it. So I often say this when I'm doing trainings, but I want to remind people that I am a proponent of both and, not either or. I don't think that online should replace in person. Like, we should stop doing in person and only meet online. But I do think we've got to recognize what God is doing in this moment. So one of the statements she makes is that this is the way to love God and our neighbors, by coming together in person. That the assumption is made that we can't love God and our neighbors if we are not in an embodied experience. That's kind of the language she uses. So she said, bodies are the deepest part of our humanity, and so on. And I wouldn't disagree that there is a level of connection that you feel in an embodied experience that's harder to recreate online. But anybody who is on social media can recognize the value of the relationships that we maintain and build, and it's different than in person. I mean, I'd rather be sitting in the room with you right now than chatting online. Last year, because of the pandemic, I had the opportunity to coach in 5 annual conferences about 175 pastors. So I did 16 cohort calls a month. And over the course of 6 months, like the relationships that developed, the times that we'd stop and pray in a meeting, one of our cohort members had a reoccurrence of cancer and passed before it was over. And just kind of the holy moments that we were having together as we honored her and remembered her and all of that those were real. And then at the end of my 6 months of cohorts, I went and visited all of the churches in one of the conferences in person, and the relationship that got to be extended from what we did in that virtual, I hate the word virtual. I don't know why I said that. Digital space. It extended. And when I got there, it was like we all knew each other, and there was a both and nature to it. So
part of what you're saying is that you felt like the article's a bit of a straw man in the sense that, she's responding to something that's really not even what you're saying at all.
There's actually some of what she says that I agree with. But what I would say is that embodying a community doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be in the same physical space. I've got a pastor that I've gotten to know through my work through one of the conferences who has a church called Checkpoint Church. And it's basically a gamers church, gaming online. And so they meet on Discord. They play games together. They have a weekly weekly YouTube sermon. And they're probably never going to meet each other. One of the people I wrote about in the book who actually has one of the best sort of integrated approaches to building relationships, discipleship pathway, is a friend of mine named Ann Bosarge, who runs the chapel online. And they've got like 34, 35 countries participating. It started off as a women's Bible study at the beginning of the pandemic and grew to this thing that's hundreds of people now. And real relationships, like they're embodying community through what they're doing. And so, I would take in person 9 times out of 10, but I think that we can't deny what's happening, through what we're doing in this online format.
I was just sitting there thinking, Jason, that, most relationships that have begun in the last decade begin through online dating services. Now, the statistics show. So we're talking about lifelong marriage relationships. And of course, marriage is the primary metaphor for the body of Christ, that are begun in digital space. It's not an either or, right? It begins digital and it grows to an embodied relationship over time. And I hear you saying many of the same things.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, and the reason I don't like the word virtual so much is that virtual is simulated. Virtual is not real. It's fake. Let's not call our worship virtual worship. Back in 2020, my wife got me a VR headset for Christmas. That was my one wish list, and she told Santa, and he got it for me. And my siblings and I all went together and bought my dad a matching headset. And so my dad lives about 30 minutes from where I live. And one day he called me and said, "Hey, download this roller coaster app. I want to ride it with you." And I was like, "Okay, that sounds like fun." So we put our headsets on. It's the highest roller coaster I've ever been on. It's the fastest. It's the most death-defying. And I didn't feel any butterflies as we went up the top of the hill. And I didn't feel any G-forces I didn't feel anything except that I felt connected to my dad in that moment, who was laughing his head off. Because when you go through these tunnels, your voices echo, and I've got an avatar and he's got it. When you're looking at him, they're looking at, And so it was a real relationship that was played out in a digital space. And so I do not like the term virtual. And I think about last summer, I guess it was in 2020. One of my wife's extended family members unexpectedly passed away. And the family asked, because I'm the guy who knows how to use technology, if I would broadcast her funeral. So I went and I set up 3 cameras and I did all this switching between them, and I did it on Zoom and everything. And at the end of the funeral, just the comments that came back from people said, "Thank you for letting us come to Aurora's funeral. Thank you so much for letting us be there." And of course they weren't physically there, but they felt a connection in those moments that was real. And even though they weren't embodied in the space with us, I mean, I was like in tears just watching the reaction. And then when the family came to me afterwards and told me about all the family members that were in other states that got to be a part of it that wouldn't because of COVID, it showed me that there's a transcendent experience that is bigger than the technology. If we lean into it, it doesn't happen by, again, I had to have 3 cameras and some of them were close. If it was just a camera in the back of the room and you couldn't see anybody and nobody actually, I mean, they addressed the people not in the room as well. They talked to them. So there's something about the methodology too.
That's a perfect segue to, I want to recap though. I love this. You just said a sentence, real relationship played out in a digital space. That's great. I mean, that really is, to me, the essence of the book is you're helping people understand how to use digital technology and digital spaces to enhance real relationships. But talk about, okay, so you're a pastor or you're a lay leader in a church of 200, and maybe you've had the camera in the back of the room. Maybe you did that pre-COVID. You kind of had something going. It's not really like it fully engaging. You've written a little supplemental article to kind of help people get off their static space, if you will. And we have it up on our invite site, 13 inspiring reasons to go all in on online worship. So is this the kind of thing that is going to help people with not only the why, but to begin to understand some of the how? I mean, what's the relationship of this article and the book?
Yeah, actually it's adapted from the book. So toward the end of the book, I get into this list of 13 reasons. I think that too many of us, whether we were online before or whether we had to jump online when the pandemic hit, our approach was ready, fire, aim. We didn't have time to strategize, so we had to just jump into it. And I don't think it's too late for us to think about what our why is. And the one why that this gal in the article, and then I hear a lot of pastors give, like the one pass is that if you are sick, it's okay, you're excused. But other than that, there's no other acceptable reason that you would worship from home or online or whatever. The article is going to get into 13 different reasons why we need to continue our both and worship and to really lean into it. I think about people who have felt shunned by the church. Maybe their hair was too long, or they had too many tattoos, or they don't feel comfortable in the building, or whatever the issue might be. I think about special needs families. I have a son who is a special needs child that when he was little, sometimes we had to make a choice on whether we're going to church today or not. And now we don't have to make that choice anymore. Think about shut-ins who can't be in the building. So I won't spoil all of them, but they're in there. And there are plenty of reasons. One of my favorite ones is that we can now dialogue with people, and we didn't used to be able to do that in worship. You can actually have real-time interaction with them. So if you're a small church pastor and you say, I don't know how I can't have all the fancy equipment, you don't have to. I would rather see a pastor focus on eye contact with that camera from time to time and inclusive language to the people who are not in the room. I remind people that we have 3 different groups of people: those in the room right now, those at home right now, and those who will worship at a later time. And if you give them the right kind of language, if you'd like to pray with someone today, we have care pastors in the room. If you're online right now, we have care pastors in the chat that will pray with you. And if you're worshiping with us at a later time, you can drop your prayer request in an email or in the comments, and someone will pray with you later this week. Like, let's remember that the gospel lives beyond the moment. And if we lean into it and bring new language, that makes a big difference. So a pastor streaming off a smartphone has the opportunity to connect in the same way that somebody does with fancy equipment.
So our friend David Swisher just commented here, if online relationships weren't real, we wouldn't get all bent out of shape on social media. Absolutely true, David. Those views, those criticisms, those interactions impact us and provoke visceral response because they're quite real for us. They may not be physically embodied, but they're embodied in digital space.
Yeah. David's a smart guy. He's always got great thoughts like that.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. And I kind of feel like that New York Times article wouldn't exist if it really wasn't an issue. She wouldn't have felt the need to write that anyway. So it's
again, I think if I could take her with me to Journey Church in Columbia, South Carolina, which I write a lot about in the book, and she could see the way they're doing both and. It's a church of about 600, 80% are worshiping at home, 20 in the room, African-American church. So call and response is huge. They figured out how to help people call and respond in the moment. They have these tables with what they call social media ambassadors that greet every single person in the chat, respond to every comment. And they call it the amen section because they will actually give voice to the people at home. Someone will put in the chat, preach it, Brother Ashford. And someone will yell out, preach it, Brother Ashford. And they don't yell out every comment, but they yell out enough of them that if you're at home, you feel like a full participant. And the pastor will actually respond to the comments in the chat while he's preaching. He looks at the camera, he talks to them. So whether you're there or not, you feel like a part of it. And my favorite thing of all was that, and she makes this point in the article, that the people need to taste the bread and the wine. They need to hear the choir and so on and so forth. At this church, they do a hybrid approach to communion. So if you're in the room, you're invited to take the little rip and sip communion elements and, take them in right there. But then when worship is over on a communion Sunday, the day I was with them in August, I walked out of the building and there were 30 cars in the parking lot all lined up, ready to come receive communion, with communion stewards that had gloves and masks on. And each car pulled up, body of Christ broken for you, Christ's blood shed for you. And then they drive off after worshiping online. So there is a both and sort of in the way that we participate, and we also get to live into the sacraments and offering and service and all those things. Again, for me, it's like the most exciting opportunity we've ever had in ministry to reach people in new ways. So,
in order to, thanks, Jason. That is incredible. And in order to reach our print deadline and demand, you had to finish this manuscript several months ago. But since then, you have been continuing to lead workshops and seminars on this. In fact, you're doing now kind of a part 2 with some areas, I understand, but both and to be continued. Yes. You've been doing it. So I would encourage our viewers today not only to pick up the book, because it is, as we've discussed this morning, based on real world information and interactions, has real stories, as you've been hearing from Jason, stories of people that are experimenting real time, innovating real time, what they're learning, what works, what doesn't work. The book is full of that. But also, it's really important, I think, to follow Jason online, to connect with him on Facebook and other social networks, to continue to engage with workshops and information he's learning in real time, and continue to follow this kind of emerging trend that he is on top of.
And I think, did we set a date? We're going to,
we are going to do, yep, okay. We'll have a webinar. I don't know. Josiah is our behind the scenes guru. Josiah, I don't know, do we have a date we're going to do an Invite Resources hosted webinar, I think in early March. Josiah is going to look that up.
I believe so. And I think the admission is just that if you have a copy of the book and you send us a receipt, you can attend for free, and it'll be that part 2, that both and to be continued, which is based in part on that article with the 13 reasons. But I also talk about how to create a both and think tank. So how do you get your church and your group of folks to not revert backwards, but iterate forwards? And then we'll talk about how to build an intentional chat strategy. I believe more than anything that we do right now, the most important thing we do is we have to build a strategy for how to build meaningful relationships, because we don't want our online worship to just be a big revolving door where people come and leave and we don't even know they're there. So we've got to extend the relationship to go further in to our faith community. And that might mean in the building, or that might mean online Bible study or online membership, or whatever it could be.
So that webinar date we've discussed is Wednesday, March 16th, beginning at 2 o'clock Eastern, 90-minute webinar, 1 o'clock Central, 1 to 2:30 Central, 2 to 3:30 Eastern. If you bought a book, then you can send that to us at Invite, and that'll be your ticket into that webinar to hear what Jason has been learning even since the book has been published. Jason, thank you so much for your time today. We're going to have you back on Thursday for our regularly scheduled something completely different, so we can get into some of this some more, and maybe hear some more of these stories you tell of people doing things in real space are just my absolute favorite. The story you told this morning of the couple from Jacksonville that drove to North Carolina to join a church, that's just amazing. I love that stuff. So let's talk some more about that and some more tips for how people can get started when you join us back again on Thursday.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Something completely different, special edition launch day with Jason Moore. Go buy your copy of Both and we'll see you on Thursday. Stay creative.